I still remember the smell of cinnamon that morning. The ovens were humming, the trays were full, and I was proud. 20 years at Haven Bakes, and not once had I missed a shift. I thought loyalty still meant something. At 9 sharp, my manager, Mr. Harlan, called me into his office. His tone was flat. "Joyce," he said, "we're moving in a new direction. Younger staff. Fresher energy. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends." Younger. Fresher. 2 words that felt like knives. I tried to speak, but he handed me an envelope instead. Inside was a letter, termination effective immediately. My hands shook as I read it. No thank you, no farewell, just a clean cut after 2 decades. I packed my apron, my notebook of recipes, and the photo of my parents that always sat by the window. The other workers avoided my eyes. I didn't blame them, no one wanted to see their own future. When I stepped outside, the wind felt colder than usual. 20 years gone in 10 minutes. My name, my work, my purpose, all erased. As I walked away from the bakery, I whispered, "This can't be the end." But I didn't yet know, it was just the beginning. The office smelled of sugar and flour, but that morning it felt like dust. My desk looked smaller than ever. The calendar still showed the date of our next product launch, a recipe I had created, one they would now take without my name. I sat for a moment, staring at the small collection of things that had filled 20 years of my life. A chipped mug with "Best Baker" written in fading paint. A photo of my parents, smiling with pride at my first day on the job. A notebook full of handwriting, my dreams, my recipes, my heart. One by one, I placed them into a cardboard box. Each item felt heavier than the last. Around me, keyboards clicked, ovens beeped, and no one said a word. The silence cut deeper than anger. As I walked past the hallway, I saw the company's new poster, "Fresh faces, fresh starts." My reflection stared back from the glass, tired eyes, flowers still on my hands. I paused by the door, turned once more toward my empty desk, and whispered, "You can have the desk. But you'll never have the heart that built it." Then I walked away, box in hand, into the unknown. The sky was gray when I stepped outside, and the air smelled like rain. My box of things felt heavier with each block I walked. Every step echoed the same thought, 20 years, for nothing. I passed the corner cafe where I used to buy coffee for the team on Fridays. The barista waved, but I couldn't wave back. My throat felt tight. The streets were full of people rushing somewhere, faces bright with purpose. I had nowhere to go. Halfway home, the rain began, soft at first, then harder. Drops soaked my coat, smeared the ink on the label that still said, "Joyce, head baker." I kept walking, hugging the box to my chest. A memory flashed in my mind, my mother's voice saying, "When the oven door closes, don't panic, Joyce. That's when the rising begins." I had always thought she meant bread. Now, I wasn't so sure. By the time I reached my small apartment, my shoes squished with water, and my box of memories was damp. I stood at the door, shivering, realizing I had carried everything that mattered, except my future. Inside waited silence, and something I hadn't yet discovered. When I opened the door, the quiet hit me like a wall. No hum of ovens, no chatter, no warmth. Just silence, thick and heavy. I placed the box on the kitchen table and stared at it, as if it might tell me what to do next. The apartment was small but tidy. My mother used to call it cozy. Tonight, it felt like a box too, one that was closing in. I turned on the kettle just to hear a sound. The whistle broke the stillness for a moment, then faded. I took out my apron, still dusted with flour, and folded it neatly. My hands moved out of habit, the way they always did at the end of a long shift. Only this time, there would be no next morning. I sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling. 20 years of mornings, of baking bread before sunrise, of helping others rise, all gone. Then I saw the small picture frame on the shelf. My parents, standing outside their old bakery, smiling. They looked so proud. I felt tears sting my eyes. "Mom, Dad," I whispered, "what would you do now?" The silence didn't answer, but something deep inside me began to. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains, sharp and cold. I hadn't slept much. My mind kept replaying every moment from yesterday, the look on Mr. Harlan's face, the sound of the rain, the way my name vanished from the company door. I made black coffee and spread the bills across the table. Rent. Power. Groceries. The numbers blurred together like they were mocking me. My final paycheck would barely cover 2 weeks. After that, I didn't know. I thought about calling someone, but who? Most of my friends were coworkers, people who now avoided me, afraid my bad luck might spread like flour dust. I felt small, like a forgotten crumb. I opened my old recipe notebook, hoping to find comfort. The first page said, in my mother's handwriting, "The right ingredients take time. So does strength." I ran my fingers over the ink. She had written that for me years ago. For the first time, I wondered what she and my father had left behind besides memories. They never had much, but they always saved something: tiny coins in a jar, old boxes, keepsakes. My eyes drifted toward the top shelf of my closet. There, the jewelry box. Dusty. Waiting. It had been years since I touched my mother's jewelry box. The wooden lid was carved with tiny roses, the same pattern she used to draw on recipe cards. I pulled it down from the shelf, blowing off a thin layer of dust. The hinges creaked like they hadn't moved in decades. The box was locked. A small silver keyhole stared back at me. I remembered my mother wearing a necklace with a little key charm. She never told me what it opened. I traced the carvings with my fingertips and smiled sadly. Inside this box were the echoes of her laughter, the scent of her perfume, maybe even her last secrets. I placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it while the afternoon light shifted across the room. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. What could be inside? Old earrings? A letter? A memory I wasn't ready for? I promised myself I would open it, but not yet. Not until I was ready to face whatever she had wanted me to find. That night, I set the box beside my bed. As I turned off the light, its reflection glimmered faintly, like it was waiting for morning. Love these stories? Hit subscribe, smash like and tell us where you're watching from. The next morning, I woke up with the jewelry box still on my nightstand. The sunlight touched its surface, making the carved roses glow. I couldn't stop staring at the tiny lock. Somewhere, the key had to exist. My mother never kept things without meaning. I searched through drawers, boxes, and even the pockets of her old coat I still kept. Nothing. Finally, in a small tin where she used to keep buttons, I found it, a thin silver chain with a tiny key attached. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered her wearing it every day when I was little. When I once asked what it opened, she smiled and said, "One day, you'll know, sweetheart." Now I understood. My hands trembled as I held the key against the box. It slid in perfectly, like it had been waiting for this very moment. But before turning it, I hesitated. I could almost hear her voice again, calm and patient. "Don't rush, Joyce. Good things rise slowly." I took a deep breath, placed the box on my lap, and turned the key. A soft click echoed through the quiet room, and my life began to open, one secret at a time. The lid lifted with a soft sigh, as if it had been holding its breath all these years. Inside, everything was neatly arranged, my mother's way, always careful, always gentle. On top lay a string of pearls, slightly yellowed with age. Beneath it, a stack of folded letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, her favorite scent. My fingers shook as I untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. It wasn't from anyone else. It was from her, to me. "My dear Joyce," it began, "if you're reading this, then life has changed in a way I hoped it never would. My eyes blurred with tears. Her handwriting danced across the page, steady and warm. She wrote about love, about patience, about how she and Dad had tried to prepare something for the hard days. At the bottom of the box, under the letters, was a small folded paper, crisp, official, stamped with a bank logo. My heart skipped. It was a deposit slip, dated 25 years ago, with my name written neatly in her handwriting. For Joyce, it said. And below that, an account number. I unfolded the second letter with trembling hands. The paper was soft from age, but her handwriting was still clear, careful loops, steady lines. My sweet Joyce, it began, if you are reading this, then something has ended. But endings are only the crust of something new. Your father and I started a small savings account for you when you were young. We couldn't give you much, but we gave what we could, a few dollars every week, a few more when times were kind. I could almost hear her laugh between the lines. If life ever breaks you, go to the bank listed below. Ask about the account in your name. What you'll find there is more than money, Joyce. It's time, patience, and faith, the three things we built our life on. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling her presence as if she were sitting right beside me. For 20 years, I had believed my hard work was all I had. But now, here was proof that someone had been working quietly for me all along. I wiped my tears, folded the letter gently, and whispered, "Okay, Mom. I'll go. Tomorrow, I'd find the truth." The next morning, I tucked the letter and the deposit slip into my bag. The bank's name, Hillside Savings, sounded familiar, like something from childhood. I remembered holding my mother's hand as she waited in line there, whispering to me to be patient, good things take time. When I reached the branch, it looked old but cared for, the kind of place that smelled of paper and polish. A young teller greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning," I said softly. "I think my parents opened an account here a long time ago. For me. My name's Joyce Sean." She typed my name, squinting at the screen. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, too much time had passed. Then her eyes widened. "Miss Sean," she said, "this account is still active. It's been collecting interest for over 25 years." My heart started to race. "How much?" I whispered. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You might want to sit down." I sat. My palms were damp. The number she showed me made my breath catch, not millions, but enough to change everything. I closed my eyes, tears falling. Mom and Dad hadn't just saved money. They'd saved me. The teller turned the screen toward me, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The numbers didn't look real. They stretched across the monitor like a dream, $246,300.82. I blinked, certain I had read it wrong. My parents had never earned much. They ran a small corner bakery, worked long hours, and always said, "We save for rainy days." I never imagined their rainy day jar had grown into this. "Is this all from interest?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The teller nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Regular deposits for 10 years, then compound interest did the rest." Compound interest. The word sounded magical, but also sacred. Like time itself had been quietly working on my parents' behalf. I felt the tears before I could stop them. My mother's handwriting flashed in my mind, time, patience, and faith. I signed the papers with trembling fingers. When I walked out of the bank, the sunlight felt different. The world hadn't changed, but I had. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something rise inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Hope. And with it, a whisper that sounded like my mother's voice. "Now, Joyce, it's your turn to build." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the old jewelry box beside me. I'd already moved the letter and bank papers inside, like sacred artifacts. The wooden box was scratched and faded, but it suddenly felt powerful, like it had been waiting for this moment. I made tea and read the letter again, slowly this time. Every sentence from my mother carried weight I hadn't noticed before. Never chase glitter, she'd written. True gold grows quietly. I realized she wasn't just talking about money. She was talking about me, about all the years I'd poured into someone else's dream, believing loyalty would protect me. I could almost hear her laugh, soft but certain. She'd always said, if they ever forget your worth, remind them, not with words, but with what you build next. That night, I opened my old notebook where I used to write ideas for the bakery I'd always wanted to open, recipes, names, sketches. Maybe it's time, I whispered. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about rebirth. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the refrigerator, I swear I heard her voice again. Start small. But start. The next morning, I pulled out a dusty box from the attic labeled Old Bakery Notes. Inside were my mother's handwritten recipes, the same ones she used when I was little. Cinnamon rolls, honey biscuits, and her famous lemon tarts. The pages smelled faintly of vanilla and flour, the scent of childhood mornings before school. As I turned each page, I realized she'd left more than just recipes. Beneath the ingredients were little lessons. Patience makes dough rise. Never rush sweetness. Kindness is the secret spice. Tears filled my eyes. I had spent 20 years helping someone else build a brand, memorizing other people's menus, protecting someone else's dream. But here, in my hands, was the heart of my own. I spent the rest of the day in my kitchen, baking for the first time in months. When the smell of warm bread filled the air, something in me healed. I packed a small box of pastries and wrote 3 words on the lid, for old friends. Tomorrow, I'd visit some of the staff who had been fired too. Not to talk about the past, but to offer them a taste of the future. A future that smelled like home. I started early, the pastry box warm in my hands as I drove across town. My first stop was Carol's little apartment. She'd been the pastry chef for 15 years before they replaced her with a modern consultant. When she opened the door, she looked surprised and tired. Joyce? I thought you moved away. Not yet, I smiled, handing her the box. Cinnamon rolls, just like old times. She opened it, and the scent filled the room. These are your mother's recipe, aren't they? I nodded. I'm thinking of starting something small. A bakery. Maybe even a cafe. But I can't do it alone. Carol's eyes lit up for the first time in months. You mean, work together again? Not for someone else this time, I said softly. For us. By the end of the week, there were 4 of us, all women the company had discarded like yesterday's menu. We met in my kitchen, flour dusting our sleeves, laughter filling the air. We weren't just baking pastries. We were kneading back our dignity. Carol said it best as she pulled a tray from the oven. They took our jobs, Joyce. But they can't take our recipes, or our fire. The day we decided to test our first full batch felt like the beginning of something sacred. My tiny kitchen turned into a battlefield of bowls, flour clouds, and laughter. Carol handled the dough, I mixed fillings, and Maria, who once managed the dessert station, took charge of the ovens like a general. We didn't have fancy equipment or expensive ingredients. Just skill, memory, and heart. The cinnamon rolls came out first, golden and soft, icing melting in slow ribbons. Then the lemon tarts, perfectly imperfect, their crusts a little uneven but filled with care. When we sat down to taste them, no one spoke at first. Then Maria said, "Joyce, these taste like hope." We all laughed, but I felt a lump in my throat. For the first time since losing my job, I didn't feel thrown away. I felt found. By evening, we had sold every pastry to neighbors who smelled the sweetness from down the block. Someone asked, "Do you take orders?" I looked at Carol, then at the trays already empty. "Not yet," I said with a smile. "But soon." That night, I wrote 3 words in my mother's old notebook. We're officially rising. We met the next morning around my kitchen table, scraps of paper everywhere, each covered with ideas for what to call our bakery. How about flower power? Maria grinned. Carol laughed. Too retro. Second chances? I suggested. Too sad, said Ruth, our newest member. We're not second anything. We're the main course. The laughter faded into thought. My eyes drifted to the jewelry box sitting on the counter, the one that started all of this. My mother's words echoed, true gold grows quietly. What about Dorothy's table? I whispered. After my mom. She believed food was how we show love, not status. The room went still. Carol smiled first. Dorothy's table. It feels warm. Like home, Maria added. We all nodded. It was perfect, humble, honest, rooted in love. That night, I designed a small handwritten sign, Dorothy's table, baked with patience, served with heart. We didn't have a store yet, just a dream and a logo drawn in pencil. But for the first time, it felt real. I taped the sign above my oven and whispered, "You'd like this, Mom." The next morning, orders started coming in, one neighbor at a time. Word was spreading. 2 weeks later, we'd outgrown my kitchen. The counters were never clear, and the air always smelled like cinnamon and sugar. It was time to find a real place, a home for Dorothy's table. We spent a whole afternoon driving around town, peeking through dusty windows and for lease signs. Most spots were too expensive or too broken down to dream about. Then we found it, a small corner storefront on Elm Street, once a flower shop. The windows were cracked, the paint peeling, but sunlight poured through like a blessing. This place has good bones, Carol said, pressing her palm against the old brick wall. I could already picture it, the smell of coffee drifting out the door, laughter mixing with the sound of clinking plates, a photo of my parents hanging by the counter. Maria looked doubtful. Joyce, it's a wreck. We don't have the money for this. I smiled, remembering the savings account. We don't need fancy. Just faith. We pooled what we had, signed the lease, and promised to do the work ourselves. When I turned the key in the lock for the first time, it felt like unlocking a new life. Welcome home, I whispered. The first week inside the old shop was chaos, the good kind. We scrubbed floors until our arms ached, painted walls the color of warm cream, and filled every corner with laughter and the smell of fresh dough. The landlord had left behind an old counter, scratched but sturdy. Maria sanded it down, humming softly, while Carol arranged jars of sugar and flour like treasures. I hung the sign we made, Dorothy's table, above the front door. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it. This is really happening, I whispered. At night, after everyone went home, I stayed to clean. The quiet felt heavy, but peaceful. I placed the jewelry box on a small shelf near the register, my good luck charm. I thought of my mother again. How she'd built her bakery with nothing but love, time, and steady hands. How she'd taught me that every loaf of bread was a promise, that patience makes beauty rise. By the end of the week, we were covered in flour, tired, and broke, but full of something money couldn't buy. Carol handed me a cup of coffee and said, smiling, "Tomorrow, Joyce, we bake for real." The morning of our grand opening, I woke before sunrise. My hands were trembling, not from fear but from something deeper, hope. The ovens were already warm, and the air smelled like vanilla, butter, and possibility. Maria piped frosting onto cupcakes shaped like roses. Carol brewed the first pot of coffee. Ruth arranged scones on a tray, humming an old hymn under her breath. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors, old co-workers, even a few customers who'd followed us from the restaurant. Someone had tied a bunch of yellow balloons to the door handle. When I unlocked the door, applause filled the air. My throat tightened. "Welcome to Dorothy's table," I said, trying not to cry. By noon, every table was full. People laughed, took photos, and told us the place felt like home. An elderly man left a note on his receipt. "Your mother would be proud." I tucked it into the jewelry box. That night, after the last crumb was swept away, I turned off the lights and whispered, "We did it, Mom." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's discarded employee. I felt like an owner of my work, my worth, my future. It was late one afternoon, a few weeks after opening day. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up from the counter, expecting another customer craving our lemon tarts. But when I saw who stood there, the air shifted. It was Mr. Caldwell, my old boss. The man who had fired me after 20 years with nothing more than a handshake and a polite smile. His suit was pressed, his shoes shined, just like always. "Joyce," he said, looking around. "I heard about this place." "Dorothy's table, is it?" "Yes," I said evenly. "Can I get you something?" He hesitated. "Coffee. Black." As I poured it, my hands didn't shake, not even a little. He took a sip and nodded. "You've done well for yourself." I didn't expect, he trailed off, searching for words. "Neither did I replied, meeting his eyes. "But it seems losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to me." He smiled awkwardly, left a few bills on the counter, and turned to go. Before he reached the door, I added quietly, "Thanks for the push." He paused, then left without a word. The door closed behind him, but peace stayed. A week after Mr. Caldwell's visit, Carol burst through the bakery door waving a newspaper like it was a golden ticket. "Joyce! You need to see this." She slapped it down on the counter. There, on the front page of the local life section, was a photo of our storefront, the sunlight glowing through the words "Dorothy's table." The headline read, "Fired after 20 years, woman bakes her way back, and brings others with her." My heart stopped. The article told our story, how a group of women, once dismissed as too old-fashioned, had built something new from the crumbs of failure. It talked about my mother's recipes, the jewelry box, and how we'd named the bakery after her. Customers poured in all day. Some came just to say they were inspired. Others came to taste the bread that started it all. That night, after closing, I sat with the paper spread across the table. My name looked strange in print, not as an employee, but as an owner. I traced the words, "bakes her way back," and smiled through tears. Mom had always said, "Joyce, life doesn't end when doors close, that's when ovens open." And she was right. Success came faster than we were ready for. Within a month of the article, the line outside Dorothy's table stretched down the block every morning. Our oven barely cooled, our hands barely rested, and though our hearts were full, our feet ached. "We need more space," Maria groaned one evening, wiping flour off her face. "Or more hands." Carol nodded. "I love this, but we can't keep up. We're turning customers away." I knew they were right, but growth meant risk. More rent, more bills, more uncertainty. I looked at the jewelry box sitting by the window, sunlight glinting off its lid. My mother had once risked everything to open her bakery too, and she'd taught me that comfort never bakes anything new. So, we did it. We hired 2 young apprentices from the local culinary school, bright girls who reminded me of myself at their age. Nervous but hungry to learn. The first day they joined, one of them asked, "What's the secret ingredient here?" I smiled. "Patience," I said. "And a bit of faith." As the ovens hummed and the shop filled with laughter again, I realized something. Success wasn't just about rising. It was about lifting others too. It was a quiet Tuesday when the letter arrived, an old-fashioned envelope, the kind that carries both dust and memories. My name was written in neat, slanted handwriting. No return address. I sat by the counter and carefully tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. The moment I saw the handwriting, my breath caught. It was my mother's. "If you ever find this, Joyce," it began, "then it means the world has brought you back to where you belong." I knew one day you'd need more than recipes, you'd need courage. So here is my last gift. Tucked inside was a tiny deed to a small piece of land just outside town. The same land where she used to take me berry picking as a child. Tears blurred the words as I read the rest. This place is yours now. Maybe one day, you'll build something there, something that feels like freedom. I folded the letter, pressing it to my chest. She'd been gone for years, yet somehow, she was still guiding me. That night, I whispered to the jewelry box, "I hear you, Mom. I'll go see it." The next morning, I drove out to the edge of town, following the dirt road that led to the hill my mother used to call Sweetberry Rise. The air smelled like rain and pine, and for a moment, I felt 10 years old again, running barefoot through the grass with her laughter echoing behind me. When I reached the top, I saw it, a stretch of land overgrown with wildflowers and brambles, but still breathtaking. The sunlight danced on the grass, and the air felt alive. I closed my eyes and could almost hear her voice. "This place holds dreams, Joyce. You just have to plant them." I knelt and touched the soil. It was rich, warm, and ready, like it had been waiting. Suddenly, an idea bloomed inside me. Not just a bakery, but a retreat. A place where women like us, the overlooked, the underestimated, could come to rest, to learn, to rise again. I smiled through my tears. "Dorothy's table was just the beginning," I whispered. "This will be her legacy." The wind brushed past me, gentle and sweet, carrying the faint scent of berries. It felt like a blessing, straight from her hands to mine. A year later, the land at Sweetberry Rise was no longer wild. A cozy wooden cottage stood where weeds once grew, surrounded by neat rows of berry bushes and fruit trees. A small sign hung by the path, "Dorothy's Haven, a place to rise again." Women from every corner of town came, some tired, some broken, all searching for a fresh start. We baked together, shared stories, planted seeds. Laughter filled the air the way my mother's voice once did. Sometimes, I'd stand on the porch at sunset, the jewelry box beside me, watching the light fade over the hills. Inside it were her letters, the deposit slip, and a photo of us at her old bakery, both smiling, covered in flour. One evening, Maria joined me, handing over a warm loaf of bread. "You did it, Joyce," she said softly. "You turned loss into something beautiful." I looked out at the women below, their hands busy, their spirits bright, and smiled. "No," I whispered. "We did." Then, in the hush of dusk, I could almost hear my mother's whisper carried on the wind. "You've risen, my girl." And for the first time in forever, I truly believed her. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.